We're back again. Harlequins podcast. We're 2 wins and 4 quarters. My name's Michael. As always, I'm sat here with my cousin Will. Will, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, mate. Double win this weekend, so we're flying high.
Yeah, unbelievable week for the club. Double winning weekends, double screen Saturdays. It was quality, wasn't it? 4 from 4 since we started the pod for the boys. They're rolling, and the women massive sort of gritty win down at Surrey Sports Park in a tight win against Wasps, and back now in the top 2 and in the hunt for home semi. So should we touch on the men's game first? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, I think it was quite tough with the scheduling, but luckily we managed to get a bit of crossover, didn't we? And we were able to commit to the whole first half of the men's team, and then there was a bit of crossover between the second half and the women's first half, and then commit to the second half of the women's game. So we did well to kind of get a bit of both there. Hopefully the scheduling's a bit kinder to us next time, but 2 huge wins for both teams, and in 2 very different fashions as well.
I think we were quite lucky with the scheduling, actually, because the first half the women struggled, and then as we tailed into it, we got all the give it in the tries and the comeback.
Yeah,
so it was great.
That is so true.
What were your general thoughts of the men's game then? Obviously, it was a pretty attritional first 20 minutes. It was tough. It was fast. Both teams were. It was quality in the first 20, wasn't it? It was nuts.
It was. I really enjoyed the first 20 for a 0-0 as well. I thought it was a really good sort of free-flowing game. Both teams came to play. I know we talk about how we started playing the game in 10-minute blocks. Our coaches have started saying that, and I've heard Marcus call that out a few times as well. I don't think we lost either of those first 2 10-minute blocks, and we definitely won the third. I think the second quarter of the game, that 20-minute period just before half-time, was what won us the game in the end. Those 3 tries that we ran in. It's becoming a familiar story, isn't it? We seem to get a head start on teams. We get in front, get our noses in front, and seem to get a decent lead. And then it becomes us holding on, which is what gets me anxious whenever I watch. So I know against Wasps, we managed to keep the foot on the throat and push through. In this game against Sale, although they started to creep back in, we were better at managing the game. But I think that 20-minute period before half-time, particularly when they lose a man to the bin, and then you look to the first 10 minutes in the second half, you've got to come out and score first. You're 21, they're like, we've got to get the next points from a psychological point of view. And even if it was just 3, which it was in the end, I think it was the right thing to do. Although we didn't take advantage of the yellow card, it would have been good to come out flying again and really put them to the sword before they've even got a chance to get back in the game.
Yeah, we blitzed them on the half-hour mark, didn't we? And it panned out brilliantly for us, obviously coming from the last episode and some bits we put out on social media, obviously before game. We were not dogging Joe Marchant, but he's probably by his own admissions. Probably by his own admissions, had a couple of quiet weeks, and here he is on his 100th game. I mean, I honestly I've not been as excited. Obviously, we've had some great wins in the last few weeks, some away from home and obviously at home, but I couldn't tell you how the feeling that I had sitting on my sofa with my housemate with my Quins top on, watching him run home that try.
Yeah, brilliant.
Down into the into the corner. It was, especially after how tough and how close the first 20 was. I was genuinely up on my feet, off my sofa. I mean, unbelievable turnover from Will Evans in the middle of the park. Sets up the counter attack. The ball comes out the back. Don Brandt through the hands. Brown through the hands.
Lovely, wasn't it?
Unbelievable. And Joe Marchant sprinting in the corner. 2 minutes later, Marlon Yard scrambling around on the floor. And
brilliant. That was the best bit.
How good was that? And then we pick up another one, and we blitzed them in a space of 5 minutes. And yeah, I mean, it was awesome. And obviously, we like I say, we put a bit out there on Joe Marchant, pre-game and on our social media, and he certainly delivered.
Yeah, I think it was fair though. I think each player is their own worst critic, right? And maybe it's the podcast curse, but we also said the same thing about Archie White a couple of weeks ago. He was a bit unproven, and then the last few weeks he's really stepped up, and we're big advocates for him now. So I think similar effect with March. I'm sure he probably didn't even hear it ahead of the game, but yeah, he's been off the boil a little bit, and then shows up on his 100th appearance and bags 2 tries. So very happy to be put right there. And actually, although that move in itself that led to the try was amazing, there was one just before it where the sleight of hand from Andre, it looked like he was going to take the carry and just sort of last minute popped it off to March, and he was straight through the middle. At that point, I thought we were going to get first score of the game there as well, but it didn't turn out to be so. But there's definitely promise in that centre partnership, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's the Joe we missed, haven't we? Watching him run at people in open field with 30 yards of space around him. No, it was awesome to see. And I think we both also texted him throughout the game as well. And at halftime, we were saying, should be looking at bonus point territory and should be looking
100%.
at shutting them out. But obviously, we were texting throughout the game, and at halftime we were both saying bonus point, I think minimum, but it didn't pan out that way. But if you'd have offered us 4 points and beating Sale at home at the start of the day, I think we'd have both snapped your hand off.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually talked about it after the game, didn't we? If that was a Bristol or an Exeter, they would have taken all 5 points from that.
We could have been looking at top 2 how we got a bonus point. Obviously, that's would have been a world away a few weeks ago.
Yeah, think about hindsight. I think, look, obviously there's some massive wins from it. You think about, we've just played an Alex Sanderson team and we've nilled them at half time and put 3 tries on them. I think if you score 3 tries in the first half, it's almost non-negotiable that you go and get the 4th. But unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. It nearly did with the last play of the game, which would have been the cherry on the cake, wouldn't it? That would have been brilliant. Luke Northmore nearly sweeping that one up. But the second half, as it has been sort of the last couple of weeks, was a bit more gritty. It must be really tough psychologically to stay in the game when you know you're so far ahead, and keep that pressure on. And naturally, in a game of any sport, both teams are going to have shots at some point.
I think you're right when Sale are too good a side to let us just score another 2 or 3. They're obviously Sanderson's not been there long, but they are going to be one of our close competitors for that top 4.
No, you're right.
Spot. So they'd have been pretty flat after their first half performance, and they were definitely going to come out, and whether they believed or not whether they could win the game, they were definitely going to say, look, we're not going to let them walk over, because look how close we're on the table. That bonus point might be crucial at the end of the year, so they weren't going to let us just run home, were they?
No, you're absolutely right. No, maybe we're taking away too much credit from Sale there, but obviously we lost that 10-minute period between minute 50 and 60, and then there was a ridiculous no-arms tackle from Chiz right in front of the ref when they tapped it. I can't believe he didn't go to the bin for that. But on the point of Chiz, actually, he's obviously just come back from a bit of rehab. He looks an unbelievable nick, so he's quite an imposing figure at 6.
Yeah, he did look a bit trim, didn't he? Obviously, he's never been out of
shape.
Good
trim, though.
Yeah, good trim. Yeah, great trim. Yeah, he'd never been out of shape, but no, maybe just a few months rehabbing and shredded out a little bit. He looked He looked like he was moving well, and obviously a bit of a ropey sort of chop tackle, no arms in the right in front of the sticks. I was crossing my eyes when I saw it. I was like, what he did. But
speaking of the bin, though, what do you reckon for Dupree, yellow or red?
No, we could talk about this for hours, and we won't, because obviously everyone's got their view on it. My view on it was that, especially from what I saw in the Bath game on Friday night, it should have been red. I don't know what the TMO saw when he said, it's hit him on the sort of shoulder. I didn't see that. I saw his elbow and sort of out top of his arm crashing into the side of Dombrandt's head. The only thing I think that made it really, really clear was there was no mitigation at all. It was open. Dombrandt was almost a sitting duck at the back of the ruck. Dupree was nowhere near anyone else, and he just took a shot at him. That's from what I saw there. It should have been red. Obviously, the officials who know better than we do saw something different, and I can understand sort of the way they talk through the process. But when I saw it, I saw there's nothing stopping him not doing that, if you know what I mean. There's nothing that it was in his power. He could have gone at a different angle or hit him in a different place. It all looked within his control, which is why I thought it was going to be red.
Yeah, I think, as you said, it was just totally unnecessary. There was nothing to gain from it, which I thought was a bit of a silly sort of head loss, rush of blood to the head moment. I don't know if I totally agree, because from the replays, I think the initial point of contact is on the shoulder and it rides up to the head. But I mean, I don't know what the exact letter of the law is, whether that's still a red or not. You look at, if that happened in the Six Nations, it probably would have been given a red. I don't know if it's slightly different in the Prem. It can't be. It's the laws of the game.
And
so
I think that's what made it difficult personally, is that everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks in the Six Nations with Ferguson and Omani and obviously the Friday night, it's made everyone more aware of it, and everyone's senses around it much more heightened, and there's giving more criticisms of it, and obviously that it was a yellow at the end of the day, and that's where we stand, and then still with the win. But one thing that we would very quickly touch on, and I'm going to pump you up a little bit here, mate, because your social media game in the last couple of weeks has been pretty strong. I think the commentator actually said it, and actually what I will say again is I thought the commentary yesterday for a guy that was on his own was very good during the game. I think
it was Sam Roberts. I think that was his name. But really by himself, he was top drawer, wasn't he?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the BT coverage, and I think BT as a rule do some unbelievable work. But yeah, I think he his tempo and his talking was really great, and maybe that's something we can learn from. But no, we'll pump you up a little bit here. The Danny Kerr Jack Sparrow comparison that you chucked on Twitter got some real traction.
Yeah, I can't take the brains for that one. That was obviously Sam Roberts on commentary, but the execution I'll claim. But no, the game, obviously, exciting to watch. If that red was well, if the yellow was given as red, then it's a completely different game. It's probably game over at that point. But they're a bit of a nasty team, Sale. Obviously, when they scored that try and left a bit of afters on Marcus, it was again just totally unnecessary. So that's probably what makes them so tough to play against. But they're a bit nasty. I'm not sure I'm a massive fan of that from sort of an etiquette point of view or best class rugby. One thing I would say is, and again, I think Sam Roberts addressed it on commentary, is there a better 8, 9, 10 in Premiership Rugby at the minute than Don Brandt, Karen Smith?
I think the easy one to look at is Exeter, when you've got the Simmons brothers at 8 and 10, and Jack Maunder's been playing in there a little bit at 9. But I mean, maybe if you think about everyone at full strength, you maybe think Hughes, Sheedy, Harry Roundel at Bristol's probably close.
Yeah, not a bad shout. Yeah, not a bad shout.
At the minute, on current form, I don't think anyone's getting near them, and they're doing brilliantly. And I actually thought Don Brandt looked pretty tired yesterday, especially in the last 10. He looked like he had some pretty heavy legs. Obviously, Sale are physical up front, and like I said, I think they are a bit nasty and they have got that bit of grit. But again, that's probably what makes them such a tough team to play.
Yeah, I can only imagine that's why Eddie's not picking him, is perhaps his physique or match fitness isn't up to sort of elite test match level yet. But I guess you only get that when you get given the opportunity. One thing I really enjoyed from the game, actually, which I'd like to see us continue to do, is a bit of innovation. So obviously Andre kicking for touch is a new thing we haven't seen before, and that seems to be going well. We saw Danny Kerr in the line out at one point as well. So I'm enjoying all the things we're playing around with and testing out and seeing sort of where we can get an advantage that perhaps people wouldn't have thought of before. And also it shows a bit of creative thinking from the players and how they're playing the game with a bit more enthusiasm, I guess.
I think the word I was going to use there is freedom. They're playing with freedom. Yeah. I think that's probably, from what it looks like on the outside, what the coaching staff are doing to them at the minute. Boys, go and play with freedom, go and express yourselves, go and be creative with the ball, go and win games of rugby, and it's working brilliantly at the minute. And obviously we've got a tough game next week up against Newcastle. But before we touch on that, obviously we can't go without talking about the women's game on the weekend. Obviously, we said earlier we were lucky to have that sort of crossover in time to make it to be able to watch it. And the coverage on YouTube down at Surrey Sports Park. It's I don't know if you've ever been there. I've been down there a fair bit for some uni stuff, and it's a pretty tough place to be on a freezing cold windy afternoon. And we missed most of the first half, although I had it on obviously just without the commentary. It was tough first half, and Wasps were physical up front. They were determined in defence, and we went into the break 2 or 3 tries down, and then in the last 10 minutes, unbelievable fight back. 2 big tries, rolled through the forwards. I'll give a shout out to Shauna Brown. I know she's an established international, but she had some massive turnovers 4, 5, 6 minutes of the game that got us some real territory. And then we did score, and Langi Tuima obviously missed the conversion. Obviously, Ellie Green, who was playing at 13, is usually on kicking duty, and she missed what wasn't an easy kick. We then get a penalty with a minute or so to go, and there was a bit of chat on commentary about touch or this, and there was a bit of shall they tap it and go from the players. But I mean, unbelievable. Fair play to her. Stepped up, slotted it, and we win, and suddenly we're back in the top 2 and hoping for a home semi-final.
Yeah, I think obviously next week Newcastle for the men's team will be similar in style to the Wasps game. I think it'll be quite gritty. I think it'll be relatively slow paced and one that you need to try and break down in sort of, again, small 10-minute blocks and win those little battles. I don't think it'll be one of those games that you run away with, which was similar in style to how the women played at the weekend. They had to kind of claw back into the game and end up with the last few minutes penalty to get the win. I was actually surprised about how long they deliberated over what to do over that penalty and whether to go for touch or take the points. I don't know if there was something I didn't know just from watching, but and also Tuima stepped up to the kick and it was bang through the middle, never in doubt.
Yeah,
so but there's nothing better than being behind the whole game and then the last points of the game go to you and you take the win. So big result for the women, big result for the club, getting 2 wins as well, and a big week next week.
Yeah, it was cool actually. We've had a bit of chat with Tim Hammersley, who works with the foundation and works really closely with the women, and I actually texted him after the game. I was like, "Oh, mate, I reckon there's a bit of relief around there." He was like, heart and mouth stuff for 20 minutes in that second half, and we'll give some shout outs. Leanne Riley, established international, 50 caps for the club. Obviously, they're missing Rachel Burford in the middle. That's a big loss. But no, it was awesome, and especially how well the women are going and how well they're playing. Obviously, they had rough couple of weeks with 2 losses. Obviously, they played a good Loughborough side, but it's it's promising things, and hopefully, down the line after the Six Nations has been completed for the women's game, there'll be a home semi-final at the Stoop, which potentially there may be some fans in for if we're lucky, and we might get in there ourselves and hopefully get to watch it, and that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And looking ahead to next week, we were actually very fortunate to be joined by Falcons. And if you haven't heard of them, they're a Newcastle Falcons podcast, obviously based up in the Northeast. And they reached out to us, and we thought, what better way to preview the game next weekend than to jump on a call with them and discuss some talking points. So we hope you guys enjoy it.
Boys, how we doing?
Very well, thanks. Nice to chat.
Thank you.
Bit of a weird one, obviously. We're both fairly new to the podcast game, and really cool you guys reached out on Twitter to us, and it was a pretty cool opportunity, obviously, with the game coming up in a week's time. What's been your boys' verdict on the season so far? Obviously, you guys came out of the blocks pretty quickly and have tailed off slightly, but how do you think it's gone?
I think I'd say it's pretty much exactly that. We started off almost on cloud 9 because we played quite poorly in 2 friendly matches against Ealing, and we were saying early on the season, we then come out, beat 4 very strong sides and find ourselves top of the table. And then kind of since the new year, we've lost a couple of games. The European fixtures were cancelled, and we've not really ever got back in the swing of it. We've seen the last 2 games that we've had to forfeit as kind of an opportunity. And yes, we come away with 4 points from the 2 games, but it would have been nice. And I think that there was the chance for us to end up with at least 8 or maybe 9 or 10 if we really clicked. But yeah, it's one of those things. Maybe the break will do us good and it'll be a good springboard, but also there could be the rustiness that we feared at the start of the year could come into play.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's funny how some teams react to it differently to others, and it can actually really kill a bit of momentum, can't it? So it's difficult to predict how next week's going to go between us. Obviously, we're coming at it from a totally different angle. We've just had 4 on the bounce, and then we've got a good bit of form behind us now and a bit of momentum. So it's interesting to see how that'll shape up against you boys next week.
Yeah, I mean, we've said in our podcast, actually, one of the main themes was we're not sure which Falcons team is going to turn up. There's a lot of press at the start of the season about how we actually took the opportunity of having all those months off because, of course, obviously our championship season ended early, and actually we took good advantage of that, and that showed in our early wins. But we also had a COVID break before our London Irish game towards the start of the year, and you could tell things weren't clicking, and I really don't think the break helped us. We also had a couple of unfortunate injuries, again, which really disrupted the flow of really how we were playing in those prior games. So I think going into the game against yourselves, I'm a bit more pessimistic. I think the break probably hasn't done us very good, especially that we've had obviously COVID problems, and we don't know which players are infected. We don't know how long they're going to be ill or out for. And I think that, as well as the fact that the training ground's being closed, it's just all that disruption is going to add up. And I don't think it's going to be a particularly good day for us. And of course, obviously, as you said, you've had 4 on the bounce, and I think you're going to be flying high. And I think it may just be a bit too much for us.
Yeah, I think there's obviously pros and cons of it, isn't there? I mean, you've had an extra couple of days to study us and probably watch our game and prepare for us and shut down any strengths that we may have. But equally, you might be slightly off the pace because of the break. It could have the opposite effect. You could come back really refreshed. So it's really difficult to predict how these COVID breaks are influencing teams. And I think actually over the last 4 weeks that we've got off to really quick starts, maybe with the exception of Sale, but when you go 21-0 up on them, you're obviously in the ascendancy. That's probably not something we'll get against your boys. I think you're quite tough to break down. I imagine coming up to your place as well, it'll be a fairly tight contest. So even though we've come off 4 wins in a row, I think it'll be a different kind of challenge for us, which perhaps we haven't faced yet.
Yeah, I think also if we look at the informed players, our informed players, I'd say Wilson and Gary Graham have been called up for international duty. Yeah. We've got a few others in the kind of the type 5 that are playing quite well. But if we look at your like Marcus Smiths and Don Brandts, I'm surprised that Don Brandt didn't get the call up for England this last few days with Willis going out. I personally think Marcus Smith is what England need at the minute, but Eddie Jones doesn't. And the one thing I hope is that there's a horrible weather in the northeast and Marcus Smith isn't quite used to it, because otherwise I can see him tear us to ribbons, if I'm perfectly honest, because the way he plays isn't necessarily complementary to the way we defend, which could be a bit of a problem.
He's a sunny South Coast boy, much like myself, Marcus. I don't think we do too well in the cold weather. I think then the one other thing I'll say on the COVID break is it really interesting. We played Bath at, I think, probably the best time anyone's going to play Bath this season, when they had all that uncertainty and all those sort of false negative tests, and in a time where they were, almost in turmoil. And then also they went up to Sale and turned Sale over at home, which was a crazy win. But obviously we played them at a time that was so difficult for them to turn around and train and know which players are unavailable, which players and which staff were in lockdown or in quarantine or whatever. So we got a bit lucky probably in that sense. But it's going to be tricky to see how that pans out. Obviously with you boys having a couple of weeks off, but I think it's definitely something that we're going to be looking at more. I hope is going to be an 80-minute performance. Obviously we've tailed off, and Newcastle is a long way geographically, but it's also a pretty tough place to go and play rugby. Everyone in the Premiership knows that, and you boys are definitely nothing to be looked over, even though we're on a pretty good run of form at the minute as well.
What sums it up is if you look at the league table, so if you look at our points difference, as you say, we defend very well. So actually, I think even with the fixtures that's gone, especially with our game being cancelled, we're probably still in the top 2 or 3 best defences in the league. However, our major weakness is scoring points, because even when we won games, we haven't picked up any bonus points from it. And it is a major weakness, especially at the moment. I think it's a combination of the fact the flow was disrupted with the COVID cancellations, and we've lost some key players. Burrell especially gives that X factor, can really go over the gain line. It's something that little bit special which we've been missing. We just haven't been scoring enough points. So I think the best example of that was Exeter when they came up. We put in a really good shift. Defensively, we were really good. We have been guilty of switching off a couple of times, which is how these teams win. But we just didn't show anything in attack, really, and that's what cost us. And I think it's probably going to be fairly similar, actually, when you come up this weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Philip, you touched on your defence there and how you feel like Marcus might be able to unlock it fairly steadily. And obviously, Ian, you touched on it there as well about your defence being reasonably strong. How much of that is down to one of our old boys, Nick Easter, and the job he's done since he's moved up there? Obviously, he started out in our coaching setup when he was...
fresh out of the squad, wasn't he? Fresh out of retirement.
Yeah, novice might not be the right word. He was new to coaching, and we gave him that shot, and now he's obviously come to you lot. How's he getting on?
Yeah, so at the start of the season, we were playing quite an interesting defensive structure where the centres would go up very quickly, and our open side winger would effectively cut off the outside centre's pass. We got a lot of turnovers out wide, either through knock-ons or holding on penalties or whatever. Because we isolated that, it tended to be the 13. What that made us quite vulnerable to were chips in behind and kind of a fullback on a second line of attack and getting the ball out very quickly. With Burrell and Flood's injuries recently, our centres have not defended necessarily the same way. It might be tactical, it might be just that we're not trying it. But I find that it's kind of almost like a schoolboy defence where everyone's got their own man and you just kind of track them a bit. And at the start of the year, we were making yards in defence, whereas now we almost just let people run into us, then you gain a couple, and we're on the back foot and a couple more phases, and we get quite disjointed. And the way that Smith sees a gap, runs in it, puts people through holes, I think that once we get on that back foot, it's probably only the second or third phase you'll need, and there'll start being these gaps where some of the faster boys or the back row coming through can start really tearing us up. Bit worried about it, but hopefully we've got a couple of tricks in the sleeve. And also Nick Easter does know how Harlequins like to play. He'll be well aware of a lot of the players, and he might know things that perhaps you and I both don't know about what your structures might be, or perhaps moves that you favour.
Yeah, I think generally, if you tack on the end of that, if you take the comparison to last season, I know it's a championship, often very different personnel, but we were very, very solid in defence last season. Now, I know obviously we're playing inferior teams, but our defence last season was based on the fact that we were just kind of did the basics right, and eventually teams would just run out of ideas or carry out unforced errors or whatever, which is more prevalent at that level. I think Nicky's just kind of added something extra, which obviously was needed for the Premiership. And that was especially apparent, as Philip said, at the start of the season when we were trying new things. We were very, very aggressive at the breakdown, maybe giving away too many penalties as a result, but there was definitely a noticeable change there. We were sort of, many ways, again, as Philip said, on the front defence, making gains in defence, which wasn't happening in the Championship, really, actually. We were just sort of very solid and did the basics right. So I think it was Nick Easter's kind of added that edge. Hasn't been so much, again, as Philip said, in the last few games, maybe because of personnel or the disruptions. But generally, I do think he has added something which was needed.
I think that's a really interesting point, and obviously it's the upward trajectory coming up from the Championship is something that clubs find really tough. But obviously Newcastle have done it a couple of times, so maybe that bridging that gap's not so difficult. But I think the really interesting point you make, Phil, about the way that your backs attack, especially when you say maybe a little bit susceptible to a kicking game. We've effectively at the minute got 3 fullbacks playing in our back three with Morris and Liner and Mike Brown, who are all sort of by trade fullbacks. And like you say, Marcus is the way he sees gaps and his kicking game, although it's been a bit difficult last week. Obviously, it was pretty windy down here in Twickenham. And Danny Kerr, out of hand, his kicking has been good throughout his career, and he put in a couple of really amazing kicks in the game against Sales. That's going to be something that will be interesting to see how it works out. And obviously, talking of our famous number 15, he's got his own bar now in the club. But there were rumours of Brownie leaving us this year. Is that something you boys put any traction to, or is that just sort of hearsay?
Well, it was broken to us in the rugby paper, I think, and a couple of the sources you see online. And generally, the sources that came from were pretty they're usually pretty reliable, and I think there's a link obviously with Richards as well. We weren't sure if it was going to be joining us partway through this season or obviously to the start of next season. I think it's going to be the latter, but I think it's true, and I'm personally really, really excited by it. I think it was sort of maybe a 70-30 split when it was announced in terms of in favour of it. I think some people thought, oh, well, he's past it. He's hardly going to be there for a payday, because I don't think we would pay as much as Quins would. But, is this just a big name to kind of fill in a gap or whatever? But straight away, I was really excited by it, because I know he's fallen out of favour of England, but for Quins, he still is often the best player on the pitch. And I think his performances recently, especially at the weekend, he was superb. And obviously, fingers crossed, if it is true, that is going to be a massive coup for us.
Our current number 1 fullback is Penny, as you'll be familiar with. He's a very capable player, but I still think he's got a bit of developing to do. And one thing that our whole back three on is tall. There's been a number of matches this season where in the air we've looked quite vulnerable. When Penny's been injured, we've been having fly halves or wingers filling in at fullback, and they're okay once they've got the ball, but when the ball goes in the air and there's a big Gary Owen or the positionally, they're not always in the right place. We do look quite vulnerable, and I think that Mike Brown, the experience he'll bring and just what he can teach and impart to the others around him is definitely going to be the sort of experience that every sort of club needs.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I was slightly torn on this one when I saw the rumours come out, because we are going through a bit of a changing of the guard at the club at the minute. But it's Mike Brown. I mean, he's a club legend. He's part of the furniture at Quins. We don't really want to see him go. I always thought he'd be a one club man. And as you say, he's got a nurturing role to play, and then we've got the next generation of players coming through. We'd love him to be doing that at our club as opposed to going up to the Falcons and doing it there. But as you say, it's a valid source, so it could have legs in it. It'd be interesting to see what comes of it, because I don't think we're necessarily prepared with a replacement if he were to go. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of rumours come out of our club as well in terms of signings if we announce someone before, which could be a massive clue to his departure.
I'm just going to caveat all of that by saying that I hope he doesn't go anywhere, and I hope he's with us for the rest of his career, because he's my favourite Quinn of all time, and I'd hate to see him go. And I think Will makes a really good point. And obviously, he's got a nurturing role with the likes of Lewis Liner or Nathan Earl or Caden Murley, those sort of players. They're all massive for us. I don't want to lose him. He's my favourite Quinn of all time, so I'd be absolutely gutted if he ever went anywhere. Do you want to go quick 5 questions then, Will?
Let's do it, yeah. So, lads, what we were thinking is we've got a couple of questions for you. It varies from sort of your team and then also your own personal match day experiences. So myself and Mike will fire some at you, and we'll see what comes out of a Newcastle Falcons match day. So I'll kick off. What one player would you sign from Harlequins?
Mike Brown. And I think failing that, I'd probably take Smith off you, because he's got another decade in him of top quality rugby, and I think he's only going to improve as the years go on.
Gonna have to fork out now. He's got a big new contract though.
Well, yeah, we're talking about ideal worlds here, not.
I think for me, speaking as a prop, it's got to be Marler. I think I'd love to have that sort of character around Newcastle. I think it'd be great, especially on a night out.
So we'll go for an accurate points prediction, and obviously we'll put these out on Twitter and see how close we get. But give us a specific points difference and who you reckon's going to win next weekend.
So I think it'll be closer than the score actually suggests. It may be flattering for you, but I'm going 25-12 to Quins.
I think I'll go the other way around, and I think that the scoreline will be a lot closer than the gulf between the teams. I reckon that there'll be 3 points in it, and I'm trying to work out which way it's going to go, and I think I'll have to say we'll win by 3 points.
Our unbeaten run of the pod's going to come to an end up at Kingston next weekend.
If you want an actual scoreline, I think I haven't seen the weather forecast, but it was a horrible evening. I reckon it'll be about 17-14 to us or something like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I haven't seen the weather, and I'm sure if it's a miserable day, that will benefit you massively. So I'm sure that'll be a key factor within it. Whilst we've got our crystal ball out for predictions, we've done the game. Where do you think? Well, let's do both. Where do you think Quins will end up in the table, and where do you think your Falcons will end up in the table?
I think realistically we've got to aim for the top 6. There's about 8 points separating about 8 teams. So a couple of wins this way or that way or losses that way can go make a big difference. I think 5th or 6th, let's say 6th, I'd be perfectly happy with that. Quins, on the other hand, likewise, a good string of matches as you're in at the minute. If it carries on, you could easily be looking top 4. But then if the swing goes the other way, you could end up maybe 7th or 8th. You guys will probably be a bit more tuned into that than me, and I hope that you finish 7th if we finish in 6th.
Yeah. What's your match day beverage of choice? And I know that personally, I like stopping in the Prince Blucher on Twickenham Green for a pint of Guinness pre-game. But obviously, I don't know if that's different up in the northeast. What do you boys go for?
Well, I start the day with a Sports Direct mug of tea, and then depending on what time kickoff is, there's a couple of good pubs nearby. There's the Twin Farms, which you can abandon your car in, have a pint there, then tootle down to the match. And then there's in the concourses, there's a load of bars where you can get your standard John Smiths or lagers or whatever you fancy.
Yeah, I think it's Happy John Smiths. And the reason that is because I think John Smith sponsored the Falcons on their shirts for about 10 years
they did,
in a row as we were growing up. So you sort of grew up with your 10-year-old or whatever with John Smith plastered all over you. So it's hardly a bit of subliminal advertising, far from it. So I think if I was to associate any drink with going to the Falcons or rugby in general, I think it's got to be John Smith's.
I was hoping we were going to get like a Newcastle brown ale that used to sit in the front of the old Newcastle United strips from the 90s. I was hoping
not those stereotypes.
We still got some very northern answers, though, didn't we, with the old Sports Direct mug and the Mike Ashley tie-ins there.
The less said about him, the better.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And obviously, down here we've got our traditional Jolly Hog, affiliations to the Jolly Hog boys with Ollie Cohn and your pre-game sausage and your crackling and your apple sauce and nice big bun and it's absolutely superb. What's the Newcastle Falcons equivalent to a Jolly Hog sausage?
I don't know. What do you reckon, Philip? There's loads of chips, isn't there? People get piles and piles of chips, and there's these curry pies.
Whatever you want, yeah.
Smothered in gravy, no doubt.
Sort of people come out and spend the whole half time queuing up and come back with sort of huge platters of chips and pies or whatever. So if you have your second lunch, that's obviously where to go.
All the cliches we wanted there, the chips and gravy and pies.
We've covered all bases on Northeast cliches. I love that. Well, look, we hope you enjoyed that. Really cool to talk to Ian and Philip from folks on Falcons. We really enjoyed chatting to them, and we've got a big couple of weeks coming up for the club. Plug the socials quickly at Harlequins Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Keep listening, get in touch, and Will, always a pleasure, mate. Talk to you soon.
Catch you soon. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Take it easy.